I want to give a special shout out to all my patrons first. Thank you so much to my Bibliospren, Bibliohowlers, and my Bibliomancers. It means a lot to me that you give me your extra support for my passion and hobby. Hi everyone, Patek here. Today I will be doing another spoiler-free book review, but this time it will be for a special book because today I will be doing a spoiler-free book review for The Way of Eden by Philip Chase. Yes, this is Philip Chase's debut novel, and I think Philip Chase has weaved a lyrical fantasy debut that will highly appeal to both classic and modern fantasy fans. And before I begin my review, I will have to give a full disclosure first. Usually when I review an advanced reading copy, I usually say that this book is provided by the publisher or the author in exchange for an honest review, and then that's it. I leave it at that. But for this book, I need to be more specific with my transparency. Philip Chase is a fellow booktuber, fellow book reviewer, and a friend of mine. I've been friends with him for 2 years now, and he is a friend that I respect. And I need to mention, even if some of you don't believe this, I need to mention that I don't have any qualms in giving negative rating or criticisms to an author I know as a friend. I have befriended many authors in the past 6 years of reviewing books, and it has never stopped me from giving my honest thoughts, for better or worse, assuming I do manage to finish the book. Just look at my review for The Fall of Babel by Josiah Bancroft, or Ash and Bones by Michael R. Fletcher, or maybe the second book in the Pact and Pattern trilogy, The Garden of Empire, or even The Broken God by Gareth Hanrahan. These are authors that I know as a friend, and yeah, I have given their books negative ratings, even though they are advanced reading copies as well. If you think I have been giving more positive ratings more often than before, it is simply because I do not give any rating or review to a book that I did not finish. But if I finish a book with many issues I dislike, I will certainly leave a review, just like the examples I just mentioned. It is up to you to believe the credential of this review. I am not here to change your mind, but this long introduction is mainly just for me to say my respect towards Philip Chase has increased further after I finished The Way of Eden. There were a few minor hiccups in the writing that weren't suitable to my reading preference. I actually told Philip Chase about this already, and we laugh about it. I will mention that in today's video. But overall, The Way of Eden is a marvelous debut penned by a seemingly veteran author with a lot of love for the genre. The kingdom of the eternal will awaken when the Way of Eden holds sway over all of Eor-Menlon. So says the prophecies. With unrivaled power in the gift, the supreme priest Bledla leads Torlon and its mighty army to convert rival kingdoms by the sword and by the fang. Among the gathering resistance is the sorceress Sequara, whose mission is to protect her island and her Andumaic faith from the Torlanders' aggression. As holy war looms over the kingdoms of Eor-Menlon, a chance encounter bestows a terrible curse upon a young man. Dayraven's curse may decide Eor-Menlon's fate. But first, with the help of unlikely friends, he must survive the shattering of his world. This is the premise of The Way of Eden, and it did not take long for it to grab my interest. Right from the prologue. Contrary to some opinions stating that prologues should not exist in fantasy, well, I have to respectfully disagree. I love reading a prologue that functions as a way to give a glimpse into what kind of story we're getting in the rest of the book or even series, and I believe Philip Chase has nailed this nicely with his exciting prologue. Immediately from the prologues, you can tell that this is the kind of fantasy book that doesn't shy away from explicit violence, with plotlines revolving around prejudice, faith, and religious zealots. It is true that fantasy books with conflicts centered around faith and a clash of ideals or religious zealots are easy to find. They are common, not only in fantasy actually, but also in our world. Countless disputes on multiple levels in our world and history have happened, sad to say, because of religion and differences in faith. When we look back to humanity's past, myriad recorded wars with staggering casualties have been accomplished in the name of religion, power, and self-righteousness. Having these in your books does not mean it will instantly sap the quality of the writing and the story. It always comes down to the execution, and well, Philip Chase has implemented this into his narrative so damn well. I have often stated how much I enjoyed reading modern epic fantasy that implement elements and tropes from classic fantasy. For examples, just a few examples: The Faithful and the Fallen by John Gwynne, The Bound and the Broken by Ryan K. Hill, and then The Five Warrior Angels by Brian Lee Durfee. Just a few examples. And Philip Chase books have similarities to John Gwynne's and also Brian Lee Durfee's. Speaking Speaking of The Five Warrior Angels by Brian Lee Durfee, both The Five Warrior Angels and The Way of Eden adapts brutal fanaticism and religious zealots as one of the key driving force of the narrative. So if you like the topic of faith depicted in The Five Warrior Angels, there is a good chance you will like The Way of Eden as well. The way the novel is written and told, I think it is more precise to say that The Way of Eden is a magnificent mix of both the classic and the modern. Philip Chase's journey in writing, polishing, and finally publishing the entire trilogy, the entire Eden trilogy, took more or less almost 20 years. And I think that is a truly impressive dedication. And I am glad I have the honor to befriend the author for 2 years now. I know Philip's passion in the fantasy genre is undeniable and it shows in his writing. But nothing I just said would matter much if I did not end up caring about the characters. And fortunately, Philip Chase's protagonists were easy to like. Chase uses multiple third-person POV chapters to tell his story, and Dayraven is the dominant main character of The Way of Eden, at least as far as the first book of the trilogy goes. Dayraven on his own is already a likable character in my opinion. You know the drill by now. A young, kind-hearted man, a young, kind-hearted protagonist, unbeknownst to anyone, has an uncontrollable power, and an unfortunate incident force him to leave his village. In other words, the Chosen One trope. Yes, prophecies and chosen ones have been used infinitely in the fantasy genre. Although I do not have any issues with these tropes in fantasy, it is also admirable how Philip's lyrical prose somehow made the narrative in The Way of Eden feel so fresh and engaging. I did not feel like The Way of Eden was a direct copycat of any fantasy books I've read. There were a few sections and events that reminded me of reading The Lord of the Rings by J.R.R. Tolkien, but it felt inspired and natural to the plotline. For example, like this passage. Dayraven looked over the heads of the soldiers in front of him at a knoll rising above the plain. Atop the knoll, like a god surveying his creation, a figure rode a magnificent white steed. And though the distance was not small, Dayraven knew the figure was King Erconwald. Now he understood whose will the drumbeats called them to obey. With this realization, he perceived the great pride illuminating the determined faces around him. In the eyes of his fellow soldiers glowed a strange joy. They were ready to kill and die, to leap into an abyss to get at the foe. They were waiting for the man on the horse to tell them to do it. If you have read The Lord of the Rings, I think you will know which scene this passage reminded me of. And it worked incredibly well to the scene in the book after all the momentum building. It truly helps that Dayraven was not the only main character I cared about. I am the kind of reader who cherishes inspiring friendship and brotherhood. And Dayraven's brotherhood with Imhar remains one of my favorite parts of the entire novel. Their friendship with one another just felt so genuine and believable to me. The struggles they face in The Way of Eden strengthened their connection with one another, and of course my connection with Dayraven and Imhar as well. And it's not only both of them. Along their journey they met other great characters such as Earth, Orvandil, the Dwarves, and Sekara, and all of this made the book more compelling to read. Sekara is also one of the other main POV characters in this book. But enough about the protagonists, I will let you read and find out about them for yourself. But I just want to say one more thing here before I move on to the next section. Just one more thing I totally appreciate about the characters and the characterization. Chase included the POV of the villain. I have frequently stated in my reviews that I think this should be almost a staple in epic fantasy with multiple POV characters. It gives extra depth to the villain when it's done right, and it also adds variety to the narrative. It adds complexity as well. Philip Chase succeeded at doing this. The Supreme Priest Bledla at first was just absolutely insane. His willingness to do everything in the name of his religion was just obsessive and terrifying. Bledla is the kind of character with absolute belief, and he is fearless in exposing unbelievers to violence and death to achieve his goal. At the same time, despite all his cruel actions, and I never liked him, but I also understood why he did the vile things he did based on the text. It is all well written. There were other antagonists with their own respective motives, but I think I will let you read about them on your own time rather than hearing it from me. Please note that although The Way of Eden may contain a few explicitly violent scenes, it is not a grimdark fantasy novel. It is a lyrical and traditional epic fantasy oozing with some mythical quality due to its world building. This is another reason why I mentioned Tolkien earlier. There is a relatively higher learning curve due to the many names of the characters in the present days or history appearing in the book and many similar sounding location names all ending with on. The world of A.R. Menlon is plagued with centuries of hatred, tragedy, pain, and glory. It is immersive and rich in history. And there are meanings behind every location name here. But speaking of Tolkien, one aspect that did not gel with me too well in The Way of Eden, just like in The Fellowship of the Ring, was the songs. This is definitely a subjective experience, and even though I would love to read more bards in epic fantasy, I am also not a fan of having too many songs in an epic fantasy novel, not when they appeared many times anyway. The Kingkiller Chronicle is one of the few series where I felt the songs were a delight to read, but overall, the slight disruption in the pacing of my reading experience is not that big a deal. Chase has wonderfully balanced the plot movement, characterizations, soft magic, actions, philosophies, and world-building details such as lore, weaponry, armory, and settings. And not gonna lie, it is hard to resist reading a beautifully written fantasy novel imbued with such a crystal clear devotion to reading. The Way of Eden might become the best fantasy debut of the year 2023 for me. We are still in March, so it's still too early to tell. I still have some other fantasy debuts of 2023 that I want to read, but the potential is certainly there. Whether you are a fan of the classic, the modern, or both fantasy, there are many things to love in The Way of Eden. The themes and writing in this book evoke a timeless quality, and the battle, whether they're the small skirmishes or the big war scenes, were so engaging and intense. The book won't be suitable for those who are looking forward to reading a grimdark fantasy novel or a fantasy novel with a hard magic system. But beyond that, I think The Way of Eden can be enjoyed by many epic fantasy readers. Congratulations to Philip Chase for this great debut, and I expect the next two books in the trilogy, both of them will be published this year as well. I expect the next two books to be even better than The Way of Eden. So we're just at the beginning of this great trilogy. There were a lot of setups established in The Way of Eden, and I think the payoffs in the second book, The Prophet of Eden, and of course the third book as well, I think the payoffs will be very rewarding. So that's the end of my spoiler-free review of The Way of Eden, and I'm really proud of Philip Chase for crafting this debut. I mean, just the fact that he finished writing this novel and ready to publish this entire trilogy within this year was already amazing, but this debut is really good. I think you should definitely pick this one up, especially if you are a reader who have missed fantasy books such as the one that is written by Tolkien. Remember that The Way of Eden comes out only a few days from now, on March 21st, and the second book will be released on June 21st, and the third and the conclusion of the trilogy will be published, I think, on September 21. So yeah, all of them on the 21st. That's pretty much it from me today. If you have read The Way of Eden, do let me know your thoughts. If you haven't, do you plan to get this book? I highly recommend it. As always, thank you so much for watching, and thank you for your support. Bye-bye. Lastly, I want to say thank you so much once again to all my patrons who keep on supporting me.